The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, taping this on a Tuesday afternoon here in Southern California, and we will be running it on Wednesday on the phone from TNT. Multiple world How many rings did you win?
5.
5-time champion Steve Kerr.
Can
So
I
you've
thank
won-
Michael and Tim again, just for the record? Thanks, guys. I appreciate those 5.
Yeah, but you know what? 200 years from now, people will just know that you won 5 rings. They won't even know who those guys were.
That's right.
So you won as many as Kobe. You've won more than Tim. You've won more than Shaq. You haven't won as many as Bob Horry.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe I'll make a comeback, try to catch Robert.
You're way up there. I'd love to see the standings of whoever won the most rings. You've got to be like in the top 15.
You know, the best was that I went straight from Chicago to San Antonio, and it was like just, falling out of a tree and winning another title. It was crazy.
Right.
The rest of the Bulls went off, and Michael retired, and guys went to different teams, and I ended up landing in the beginning of the Spurs era. It was pretty awesome.
And that was like a really weird lockout 50-game season. Season started in February, like playing for the title 4 months later. And that part of me doesn't totally count that title. Is that all right?
Well, then you can't count Miami's title last year either, right?
I know. That is the rub. The only thing is, 50 games was just not enough. And I also felt like during that season, a lot of the guys were just not in shape.
Yeah.
And you could just see it. And I remember going to the games and just being mad. Like, wow, they charged full price for this. I did feel like last year the guys came in, for the most part, in really good shape, with the exception of maybe Ray Felton and 3 others. But it did seem like they were prepared. Maybe they learned the lessons from that year. So we're 2 weeks into the season. I guess we've had 2 major stories. I mean, really, it's hard to imagine even having another story in the caliber of the Phil Jackson saga and the James Harden trade. I never got your thoughts on James Harden, so I just want to get those quickly.
Yeah.
You and I usually see things pretty similarly, especially with stuff like chemistry and the way guys interact and roll off each other. And I was just astounded that people were underrating what Harden meant to that team in terms of being Westbrook's security blanket, creating shots for other guys, being unselfish, just all the little stuff that he did that can't even be measured by stats. And watching them these first 2 weeks, I just feel like they genuinely miss him.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Well, we agree on that. I think that, from a basketball standpoint, he was such a huge part of their offense. I mean, everybody who watches the NBA closely knows that this is not a team that beats you with execution. They beat you off the dribble. They beat you with sheer force and speed. And Harden was actually the best of the 3. Talking about Westbrook and Durant, he was the best of the 3 in terms of creating off the dribble.
Yep.
And so his penetration led to so many baskets, even on the ones that he didn't assist on or score. He just broke down the defense better than anybody on that team. And so I just think that they're going to miss him a lot. I think Sam Presti's well aware of this, by the way.
Yeah.
They're going to miss him a lot. They're going to have to improve their execution. But in the end, I really admire Sam for making the trade because he did it from a position of strength. He solidified the franchise's asset base for the next decade. He cleared up their books, and they're going to be in great shape, and they're going to contend for the next decade. And every GM has a different set of rules to work under, and I think he took his, and he knew what his assignment was, and he did a really good job doing what he could to get the most out of Harden.
And you've been in that spot because your first trade when you took over the Suns was you got rid of Kerr Thomas with 2 first-round picks for nothing. And then the biggest trade you made was Sean Marion for Shaq, which was partly a financial trade, partly you want to shake up the team. But, man, when you made that trade, that was just as controversial at the time as this Harden trade was. I guess the difference for me is this. They could have just not done anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they could have played it out. And this is what I would have done. I would have played it out, made one more run, and then figured out what to do next summer. And Presti, he hasn't talked a ton about the trade, but what he has said is, he felt like this was the best deal they were going to get because by trading him during that week, that allowed Houston to give him a 5-year extension for $80 million. And it was just the biggest haul they would get. And, this is something Daryl said as well. He said he just thought Presti really liked the trade. He liked what they were getting. At the same time, man, you look at the league, and I think they would have been the clear favorite to advance in the West had they kept him.
Yeah.
Should they have waited?
Well, I think, from my own experience as a GM, you mentioned a couple of those trades we made, particularly the first one when we basically gave away, Kurt Thomas and gave away picks. If you get behind cap-wise, if you're tied up, not only do you not have leverage, but other people can feast on you, and that's what happened to us in Phoenix. We tried to keep our core together, and obviously, a lot of it was done before I got there. And Brian Colangelo really put the core group together and did an amazing job of amassing the talent that was there. By the time I got there, we were capped out, and we had paid all those guys. And if you work from behind, and now all of a sudden, you're not only do you not have leverage, but people are holding guns to your head. And I think Sam understood that as a GM. He understands that better than anybody. And so he knew that by making a trade now instead of next summer, he did better. I think this was the best he was going to do. Next summer they ran the risk of James Harden just going and signing an offer sheet, a max offer sheet, with somebody else. They didn't have to. They didn't have to accept anything. They were free agents. He and his agent. Restricted, but still free. And now all of a sudden, if Oklahoma City ran into that, they would have had the leverage that they had now.
Okay, but let's say that happens. So, in my opinion, worst case scenario, they're in the finals. They came very close to winning last year. The whole point of playing sports is to win the title.
Right.
And then you go into the summer, somebody makes Harden a big offer, you just match it. At that point, I feel like that team had more leverage than you did with the Suns, because you had Nash, who you couldn't trade because he's your franchise guy. It would have caused a riot. You had Amari, who had a big contract, who had a knee history.
Mm-hmm.
People were a little afraid of him, plus he was going to become a free agent in 2010. And then you had Sean Marion, who, he was making, I think, $18 million a year, and people were split on whether this guy was like a legitimate franchise player. Was he a role player? What was he? I think it's a little easier when you have Westbrook, Durant, and Harden, right? I mean, I feel like they could have, worst case scenario, they could have traded Westbrook and gotten a pretty good haul for him, I feel like.
Right. And I think on the surface, just from a basketball standpoint, that's what I would have leaned towards doing. I like Harden better than Westbrook, personally.
I do too.
Yeah, because he's just a much better passer and playmaker, and I think that it would have made some sense to play with a more traditional point guard. And I like Eric Maynor. I don't know if he can be a starter, but you put somebody like Maynor at the point, you put Harden at the 2, and he becomes your playmaker. And so I could have seen that. What's hard to gauge if you're not on the inside is the emotional impact of a move like that. I mean, I think Westbrook and Durant are the cornerstones of that team from an emotional level, and that's what you have to gauge if you're in the organization is, what would a trade like that do to your leadership and the belief of the guys who were there, and I'm guessing that they just felt like, since Westbrook and Durant were there from the beginning, and they were kind of the emotional leaders, that they wanted to keep the strength of that foundation going, and that's why they moved Harden instead.
Presti alluded to the fact that he was worried about if Harden's contract situation just rolled over next summer, now you have that kind of hanging over the head of the team. And some of the articles kind of insinuated that was a reason why Oklahoma City made that trade. They were worried about how that would affect the team. In my opinion, by trading Harden, they've created a much bigger issue than that. Because I think Harden, I really don't think it would have bothered him. I just think he would have played hard and knew it was going to pay off. Now they have a much bigger issue, which is the Westbrook thing. And this is something that, Scotty Brooks has talked pretty candidly about. Presti has talked really candidly about. He's even mentioned it to me about, this is a guy who's been dissected about as much as any non-superstar in the history of the league. I mean, we've seen LeBron and people like that get dissected, but not somebody on Westbrook's level. Westbrook's an all-star. He's not one of the three best players in the league. And now you're putting an even bigger spotlight on him. And you watch this team play these last couple weeks, and he's not a traditional point guard. Last night, or we're taping this Tuesday, last night I think he had 27 shots, 15 free throws. The entire team had 10 assists. You're going to have these national TV games when he's going to do Westbrook stuff, and they're not going to execute. And isn't that going to put a bigger spotlight on them than anything?
Well, they were already used to that spotlight. I mean, Westbrook last year was constantly being scrutinized. And, if he and any of his teammates were having an animated conversation on the sidelines, it became a national story. So I think Westbrook, to this point, is probably used to that. And, Oklahoma City, the last few years, has kind of been, this great small-town story, unbelievable job by Presti. They're on the rise. Well, the honeymoon's over. Now they're legitimate title contenders. And this is what you get. I mean, just ask Miami. When you get to that point and you're ready to win a title, but you haven't, you're going to be under the microscope no matter who you are. And I guess my answer to that is Westbrook's probably used to this. He's been through it now for a couple of years. And one thing we do know about him, he's a gamer, he's a fighter, he's a good guy, he works his butt off. I mean, he's got all the right attributes. He just happens to be a two-guard playing point. That's basically what it comes down to. So, can they win with that style? That's the question.
Yeah, he's the best two guard in the league. And they're asking him to play point guard.
Right.
And, and this is one of the reasons I really liked watching him and Durant and Harden all together, because I just like the way those three guys meshed as a threesome, and they kind of filled in the blanks for each other. And Westbrook's not a real point guard, but Harden, the stuff that he could do and some of the stuff Durant could do, kind of put him in a position to succeed. And even watch them, they beat Detroit last night, but
they had to struggle to do so, though.
Really struggled, and it's just bad basketball.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have bad, but they have two of probably the 8 or 9 best offensive players in the league. Durant's probably the second best offensive player in the entire league. It shouldn't be that ugly to watch.
What's interesting, though? I mean, last year during the conference finals, they're down 2-0 to the Spurs. And the whole world, including me, especially me, thought they were done. They were last in the league in assists all season long. And I'm leading the charge on the telecast on TNT saying, execution of the Spurs is just too much for the individual play of Oklahoma City. And then all of a sudden, they average like 26 assists a game for the last 4 games.
Right.
The ball movement improves. They take care of the ball, and they just blitz the Spurs with their incredible youth and energy and athleticism. So they turned it on, and they got it done. So can they do that without Harden? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Kevin Martin's a really good player, and he's played very well for them to this point. But he doesn't create off the dribble. He doesn't create for other people. So it really is a different dynamic. And because of that, I mean, I think the Spurs suddenly are like, if not the favorites, they're right there with Oklahoma City now that the dynamics have changed.
Yeah, so how would you rank them? I know it's early, stuff's going to change, but like the Grizzlies looked fantastic on Sunday night, and I think they're a contender. They've established that they're at least back to where they were in the spring of 2011. The Clippers have been better than I think. Some people actually thought they were going to be good. I wasn't one of them. They look like the way DeAndre has improved his game, what they're getting from Bledsoe. I thought Jamal Crawford might be washed up from what we watched last year. He looks like he's not washed up. So they look like they're a contender. And then the Lakers, who knows? So you might have 5. The one team that I haven't seen I haven't seen the point on this, but a lot of people have thrown Denver into like making them a legit contender. I just don't see it. Do you buy the Denver thing? Because I don't.
I see Denver as a team that should win a lot of regular season games. You know, with that home court advantage, with the altitude, with the way they run, the speed and quickness, and you know, you add the defensive intensity and the versatility of Iguodala. They should win a lot of games, but in a playoff series, I don't think they shoot it well enough. I don't think they execute well enough in the half court to win at the highest level. So I don't see them as a championship contender.
I don't see it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure I like this year's team more than I liked last year's team.
They just don't shoot it. Remember a couple of years ago they were really good because they caused havoc defensively, but they made threes, and their shooting has really gone down. I think the Gallinari thing is really kind of strange. I mean, when he played in New York with the Knicks, he was knocking down threes. I think D'Antoni even called him the best shooter he'd ever seen, which is remarkable given that he coached Steve Nash. And I think maybe some of it was he was trying to pump up Gallinari a little bit. But, you know, since that time, since he's arrived in Denver, and maybe even a little bit before with the Knicks, his shooting has really gone downhill.
Yeah, he's turned into this guy who gets his points by going to the basket,
which is great. You know,
yeah,
but you got to have the balance, and in general, I mean, we all know how important 3-point shooting is now with all the advanced metrics. It's really easy to you know, just to show people, you know, you got to make threes these days to win, and so Denver's not really doing that at a great high level, and I think that's hurting them.
And then Minnesota. Man, you know, if you're telling me Rubio can come back for March and April, and you know Love's coming back soon, I think I like that team more than Denver. I like the mix. I like the coach. I just like the way they're playing. I like the way the guys kind of interact. Like they have a team that makes sense. It's almost like I can't believe I'm saying this, but I got to praise David Kahn. He built this. He built this team that reminds me of those European teams that used to beat America 8 years ago. You know, like this really smart team.
You have to praise Kahn, and I think you have to praise Rick Adelman, who I thought the Lakers should have hired in the first place when Phil left a year and a half ago. When I was asked that question, you know, back then, my answer was always Adelman because he's such an offensive whiz, and he runs an offense that's kind of similar to the triangle. They run all that elbow stuff with a lot of good spacing and back cuts, and if you've got good passing bigs, you know, like Gasol, I mean, that offense would have been perfect. But I'm getting sidetracked a little bit. But I just think that Adelman, you know, we rarely mention him when we talk about the best coaches in the league. We always talk, you know, Pop and Doc Rivers and George Karl. But I think Rick Adelman belongs in that conversation. I think he's great, and I think he's done a fantastic job with T-Wolves so far.
Yeah, Rick Adelman's had a better career than George Karl. I'd have to measure it, but I feel like he's run better teams and done more with less. But George Karl, who is also a very good coach, seems like he's more of a media darling for whatever reason. Speaking of the media, I should have talked to you over the weekend because your name should have just been thrown into this whole LA Laker coaching search thing. It didn't have to be true, but it would just been good press for Steve Kerr.
Well, you
should have leaked it to somebody. I should have. We should have talked.
You owe me.
But it seems like because some names are getting thrown out there that had no chance, and it was like, all right, people are just throwing names out. But I feel like there is nobody on the planet more uniquely qualified to discuss a Mike D'Antoni, Phil Jackson basketball team love triangle than you. This is unbelievable. First of all, let's start with Phil.
Okay.
I felt like he had checked out 2 years ago, and that was it. Were you really buying that he definitely wanted to coach?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you think he did?
He did. He definitely did. He didn't want to coach the Sacramento Kings or the Detroit Pistons, but you know, he when this came available, I think there's no doubt he wanted to coach the Lakers. Wow.
Because I had always heard, and I even said this, that he really was intrigued by the Knicks last summer. Mm-hmm. And Dolan just shut that down. Dolan doesn't want to. He's one of those guys that doesn't want somebody who's going to get more of the attention than he does.
Right.
So Mike Woodson's perfect for him.
Yeah, I think the thing with Phil is that, you know, he's retired a couple of times and come back twice. You know, first from the Bulls and then from the Lakers, and he's come back twice. And you know, as much as Phil likes to talk about the other things that he's interested in life, and he's got a lot of interest, and he's very bright and very well read and all that, and he likes to travel. But when it comes down to it, the guy is a basketball junkie. He loves it. He used to come into practice in the very early days of League Pass. I mean, I'm talking way back. It probably wasn't even League Pass. This is like late 90s. He used to come into practice and he'd say, "Any of you guys watch the Clipper game last night?" And we're all looking at each other like, why would we want to watch the Clippers? They're horrible. But he watched everything. He loved the NBA, and I think it's never going to leave his system entirely. And I think just this opportunity in his backyard with a team that's teed up to play his style, I think it really intrigued him, and I think he wanted to do it.
Do you think once they got Dwight Howard, at that point he was like,
No doubt.
Dwight Howard,
yeah,
the third best player in the league,
and a rim protector. Phil has always been a much better defensive coach than he's given credit for, because everyone focused on the triangle. But I remember one of the first times I ever talked to Jeff Van Gundy after I retired. We talked a lot about those Bulls-Knicks days, and Jeff had a really interesting comment. He said, we never worried about the triangle. We knew we could guard the triangle. What we worried about was trying to score against you guys. And obviously the personnel was amazing with Michael and Scotty and Dennis Rodman and Harper
and you,
and all these. Yeah, and me.
And Steve Kerr, shutting down point guards. Yeah.
But that's what Phil's teams were actually known for, and what he loved was having a big defensive center. We never had a dominant offensive center, but we always had big guys. You think about Bill Cartwright or Luke Longley. We always had guys who could kind of anchor the lane. And so when they got Dwight Howard this year, I think it changed everything in terms of Phil's interest in that team. And I think he would have loved to have played Dwight and Gasol together in that triangle and seen how it would have worked.
How fast do you think they could have figured out how to teach that whole team the triangle during the season? How long would that take?
Very quickly. Nash would pick it up in 30 seconds. He's been playing against it forever. And I've heard the argument that you wouldn't be utilizing Nash in the pick and roll game. You can tweak the triangle and run pick and roll very easily out of it if that's what you choose. But he would have picked it up immediately. The offense is really made for Gasol. We've seen that. He hasn't been effective since Phil Jackson left and since he's been out of the triangle. Obviously, Kobe won 5 rings with it. I think Dwight Howard's perfect for the triangle because you move him around, you post him, you use his just the presence and the target to create offense and create passing and cutting lanes. And there would have been a little bit of an adjustment for some of the guys, but when you already have a core group who's run it and has won titles with it, the adjustment will go much quicker.
So you feel like Phil Jackson would have been the best hire for this team? It sounds like. I do. He won 5 titles there. I mean, there's such a respect for him, and he's got such an understanding of Gasol and Kobe, and so I thought he was the right choice. With that said, my thought right from the beginning was if they don't get Phil, and I thought it was going to be Phil's choice, but my thought was if Phil says no, D'Antoni is the next guy, and he made the most sense to me as the next option. Now, explain why. I'm guessing partly because he had great relationships with Nash and Kobe already, but what are the other reasons you thought he would have been a great fit?
The first thing you do is say who's out there, right? And to me, this Laker team had to have an experienced coach, somebody who has had success and been a really good coach in the league. So that list, how many are there? I mean, you think of Stan Van Gundy immediately. Well, obviously that's not going to work with Dwight there. You think of Jeff Van Gundy. Well, cross Jeff off the list because of Stan. I'm probably missing a couple of names, but Phil and Mike were really obvious people on that list. I mean, Phil being the greatest coach of all time, and Mike being a guy who has had a ton of success, has been he hasn't won championships, but he's led teams that made the conference finals, and they've been good. And he's a guy who, you started to say it, the relationships that he has with Steve and Kobe and the Olympic team, and his offense. It's a popular thing with players, so there's a lot to like about him, and a lot that's attractive for the Lakers.
I thought it was interesting. I don't think people realize the job that Mike D did in Phoenix, especially 05, 06, 07, 08. Like each one of those years, that team was a contender that maybe if a couple breaks went differently, is at least in the finals. He goes to the Knicks. He takes the money, basically. He, could have gone to the Bulls, which would have been a much better fit for him. And the Knicks offered him more money. He took it. Bad roster for him. Things don't work out. Then finally things start to work out when Amara shows up. They make the Carmelo trade. Ends up getting pushed out. Am I wrong to think that he's now underrated?
Well, I don't know. He's been getting beaten up the last couple of years. I mean, he got fired a season ago. Maybe you're right. Maybe people have sort of overlooked what he did in Phoenix. To me, what's most intriguing about Mike is that, with all due respect to Don Nelson, I feel like Mike kind of revolutionized the NBA and changed the way the game is played. It had started with the rule changes and, the league trying to open up the lane and, just tweaking the hand checking rules and stuff like that. But, Mike changed everything when he decided to play the way he did in Phoenix, the 7 seconds or less, and that the personnel was perfect for him. And back then, when he started doing it, nobody else was doing it. Playing a small four who could shoot and just running like crazy and jacking up shots early. And now look at the league. More than half the league is kind of playing that way. And so Mike deserves a lot of credit for what's happening around the league right now. Ironically, it's probably made his system a little less effective because so many people are doing it now. I think teams are more accustomed to it.
Is it simplifying the Mike D'Antoni experience to say that he succeeds with a really good point guard and he doesn't succeed if he doesn't have one?
Well, I don't know who you could say that about in the opposite way, right? I mean, who could succeed without a great point guard? I guess the answer is Phil Jackson in the triangle, but he's had Hall of Famers in other areas. But yeah, I don't know many coaches who could succeed, especially today, without a great point guard.
All right, I will rephrase. The Steve Nash D'Antoni connection. Mm-hmm. Now that they are reunited. As a basketball fan, I feel like this was the whole thing that got lost in this whole saga over the last 3 days of what happened with Phil, whatever. Like Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni are back together.
Well, that wasn't lost in Phoenix, I can tell you that. Right. My friends in Phoenix have been calling me just, are you kidding me? Is this really happening? And
yeah,
I mean, it's going to be crazy when the Lakers go back to Phoenix that first game, whenever it is. That's going to be nuts, but. No, I think that's an important part of it. People have talked about Showtime and the excitement of LA that Jerry Buss has wanted a faster tempo and a better product, just a more entertaining product. I believe that it is LA that does sell. I think that just the question, though, is do all the pieces fit? The roster does not lend itself to Mike's system that he's run in the past, and that's the biggest question to me.
Are you talking about the bench, or like which guys are you talking to?
No, I'm talking about the floor spacing more than anything.
Okay.
Think about Phoenix. Other than when Shaq was there the 1 year, it was basically, every year there were 4 shooters on the floor at all times, including Amari Stoudemire, who could step out to 20 feet and make a shot. Pick and roll with 3 3-point shooters and Stoudemire rolling right to the rim. That spacing was the most devastating spacing and shooting that I've ever seen in the history of the NBA. And so now you take a roster that has very poor 3-point shooting and has 2 dominant low post men. So the lane is clogged and there's not much shooting. It's going to be much easier to defend in the paint than it was against those Phoenix teams that Mike had, 6-7 years ago. So, he's got to adjust. He knows that. He's going to have to tweak some things, but ultimately, I think he's going to want better shooters on the roster to be able to run that stuff that he's good with.
So you just traded Pau Gasol. So Powell should pack his bags.
I think it's a distinct possibility.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense if you can get the right package. Now, my thought with Phil was that the rest of the league is kind of going to this small stuff, which leaves everybody, including Miami, pretty vulnerable inside. You know, Memphis just destroyed Miami the other night by 20.
Killed them. Yeah.
And that's with Zach Randolph and Gasol. So I thought the Lakers' strength was the Howard Gasol front line, and that by hiring Phil, that would have really emphasized that strength and maybe been more effective because the rest of the league is going small. You know, they go one way, you go the other. But of course, the rest of the roster is really suspect in terms of, you know, speed and quickness. And in order to use that size, you still have to corral, you know, the Miamis of the world defensively, and the Lakers haven't shown any ability to do that.
Mike has gotten a rap for he can't win with a center. He doesn't want to have a center. And somehow there's been this revisionist history that you were the one that wanted a center in Phoenix in 2008, but he wanted the Shaq trade too, correct?
Yeah. That trade was really a result of us knocking on the door for 4 straight years and not getting there. And I think we felt like, all right, let's take a home run swing here. And Mike really pushed for it. And you know, so we talked about it for days, and we talked about, you know, hey, how is this going to work? And to Mike's credit, if you look at the numbers, after Shaq arrived, we still averaged 110 points a game. We still scored at a really high level, but we couldn't guard, and that was our fatal flaw. And you know, we got worse defensively. We got better on the low post, but we got worse in pick and roll, and that came back and bit us in the playoffs. You know, Shaq took care of Duncan down low. Duncan didn't kill us, but you know, the Spurs just put Shaq in pick and rolls with Ginobili and Parker and killed us. And so that was, you know, one of those things that you go for it and it doesn't work, and you look back and you go, well, we gave it a shot.
I stand by the 08 Suns. I still remember that game 1. I'm sure you think about it every once in a while. You had Duncan made a crazy 3. Some Barbosa didn't switch over on somebody, forgot to switch on somebody for another 3, and it was like and then you lose that game, and you know, oh, we gave that game away. We have to win 5 games out of the 7-game series now. You know that's not going to happen. But I did feel like that game, if you win that game, that West was wide open that year. That Laker team snuck into the finals that year. I didn't even think that was that good of a Laker team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, who knows with that trade. You know, Mike, from a personality standpoint, you know, you worked with him pretty closely. Kobe's a pretty stubborn guy. Dwight Howard, kind of an enigma. You don't know if he's serious all the time, what's going on there. Gasol could be sensitive from time to time. Artest is a maniac. How do you feel like he fits in with the personality of this team?
Well, it's a good question. You know, Phil was a very confrontational coach, and he wouldn't hesitate to, you know, wield his stick if he needed to. Mike's different. Mike is much more laid back, you know, hey, let's get this thing rolling and let's have some fun. And so a big part of this is the trust that he has with Nash and with Kobe, and I think that's why the move made sense. You know, I think those guys are the leaders of the team along with Gasol, and so the fact that relationship is already strong should get things off to a good start. The other helpful thing for Mike is that he's just been in the pressure cooker in New York for the last 3.5 years, and it can't be any worse than that in terms of just the daily scrutiny. So he's used to that and pretty familiar with the roster. Remember, he had Dwight in the Olympics in 2008, I believe, and they are subsequently in the World Championships as well, I think. So I think that all really bodes well for them, that those guys know each other pretty well.
So give me a prediction. I know this is impossible to predict, but what is your gut feeling about how this plays out the next 6 months?
My gut feeling is that the Mike will do a lot of good things offensively. You know, part of hiring a coach is and being in the right place at the right time. There's a timing issue, and I think replacing Mike Brown is is a good thing for Mike D'Antoni because they played a kind of a slower style. However, it wasn't a lot of fun. Mike's going to come in and inject a lot of fun into the offense now. So I think they'll have a burst, and I think they'll be good, and I think they'll win a lot of games. Defensively, the roster is still suspect, particularly on the perimeter. I still would put Oklahoma City and the Spurs ahead of them right now in the West, and for sure Miami in the East. But we all know how crazy the NBA is and all kinds of things that can happen. So I think they'll be in a decent position, down the stretch, and then we'll see if things can fall their way, if they can make a trade or something that helps them. They'll have a shot for sure.
Pau Gasol for Josh Smith, Kyle Korver, and Johan Petro's expiring contract. Who says no?
I can't believe you said that. I was watching the game last night with my buddy. We're watching the Hawks game, and we said the exact same deal. We didn't throw the Petro in there because we didn't throw it in the machine, the trade machine.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't do the numbers, but we said, how about Smith and Korver for Gasol? Who says no? And it's a pretty good deal. Pretty good deal both ways. It makes a lot of sense.
If you're Atlanta, you have to do that trade, right? You might lose Josh Smith at the end of the next season, or the end of this season anyway. Gasol's under contract next year. Now you have Gasol and Horford together in the East, a really small conference. I don't even blink. I make that trade immediately if I'm the Hawks.
Yeah, I guess the only question, for Danny Ferry is, how much do you think Gasol has left in the tank? He's got 1 year left on his deal next season. If you feel you can make a better deal long term for younger assets for Smith, then maybe you go that direction. But since he's a free agent at the end of the year, I don't think they have a ton of leverage. So that's an intriguing possibility for sure.
Daryl Morey will trade for him.
Daryl will trade for anybody.
Daryl trade for you and I right now. Hey, you have the Celtics Nets Thursday night?
Yeah.
And Brooklyn just leaves me lukewarm.
Yeah.
There's not a single guy in that team that I would pay to see. I mean, no disrespect to any of the Nets. It's just Darren Williams is like, yeah, all right, he's good. He gets the 18-10. He's solid. Wallace is good. He hustles. Joe Johnson's solid, but there's like a lack of charisma about this Nets team. Does charisma even matter?
Well, I think it matters. I mean, but I think what matters more is just dynamic talent is what really makes the difference in the NBA. I mean, look at the Final Four teams last year. Holy smokes, that was incredible basketball.
Yep.
There's so many dynamic players on the court, and you just said it. I mean, you watch the Nets, and I mean, I like watching Darren Williams play. I think he's one of the best in the league, but there's nobody else on there who jumps out at me where I say, if I put it this way, if there's 7 games on League Pass, the Nets are not near the top of my list. They're like 5th or 6th, So what I worry about with the Nets is just that, they made such a strong push to be relevant this year in the opening of the arena that they've capped themselves out and they've tied their own hands for the next 5 years with what appears to be a kind of a mediocre team. So I don't know what's next for them once the novelty of the new arena and the new venue in Brooklyn wears off.
Oh, there's a next. It's going to be Chris Humphries and some cap fodder for Amari Stoudemire. You don't think they're going to trade for him? That's happening. I'm penciling that in already. Come on.
Let's see. Contract-wise,
it works.
Amari's got this year and 2 more, so they would take on an additional year.
They would take on, Humphries makes 12.
Don't you have to wait and see how Amari plays, though, before you take on that kind of money with his injury history? You got to see it. You got to see him on the floor first.
He's got $11 billion. What does he have to see? I have a feeling that what's going to happen with the Nets is after about 5 weeks, the whole Brooklyn thing is going to wear off. And they basically assembled like the Atlanta Hawks in 2008, right? It's just this team that's like, do I really want like, and people just aren't going to care, and they're going to have to get people.
Well, the focus there, and I've talked to people there. I mean, they felt it was so important to try to grab their fan base and establish it right away. You know, they're in the Knicks' backyard now, but they're on more equal footing because Brooklyn's cooler than the Meadowlands, right? I mean, it's a place where free agents are going to want to go. It's kind of a hip franchise now, but so they really wanted to make a splash right away. But problem is, I mean, they're you know, especially with the rules being the way they are with the cap and the tax, they're gonna have their hands tied here for the next few years.
The Celtics, way too early to figure out what they're capable of. I guess the one thing that worries me a little bit is how bad they are when Garnett's not on the floor. And then Pierce, I really hope this isn't true, but if you're just judging from what we've seen the first 2 weeks, appears to be moving into a different phase of his career. And I just don't think, as talented as this team is on paper, and I know by the 50-game mark they'll figure out what the rotations are going to be, but if you're just looking about measuring yourself against Miami, I don't see how they beat Miami in a 7-game series if Miami is healthy, if Pierce isn't pretty close to the level he's been at the last few years.
Yeah.
What do you mean,
by the way, with the Pierce comment that he's going in a different kind of direction? Just that he's on the down.
Yeah, I don't want to say he's on the downside. I think I actually feel the same way about Ginobili to some degree. I think they're at a different point of their careers where they can't bring it every night, and they're going to have nights where you just watch them and you go, "Oh God."
Yeah.
Oh, did they get old? And then you'll say the next day and it's fine. But I think, you know, the difference when you get older is, you know, as a basketball player, you can still hit that same ceiling you hit every once in a while, but you just don't hit it as much.
Yeah.
And your bad games are really bad.
Yeah. You can't
and that's
do it
the
every
difference.
night.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm sure you saw that even the last year with Jordan. Jordan was still spectacular, but Jordan couldn't produce night after night like he did in the past.
Well, I watched the game against the Bulls the other night, and Pierce started out like he was going to have a huge night. He scored 10 points in the first quarter, I think.
That was it.
Didn't score the rest of the game, and so even within the same game, I guess that can happen. But
it's hard for him to score off the dribble. He doesn't get to the rim quite like he did. I mean, the guy's been in the league since 1999. It was the 98-99 season was his rookie year, and you know, you're a perimeter forward. His game was always on the ground anyway. So who knows? I mean, you know, I think you agreed with me that Rondo is an MVP candidate this year. I'm pretty sure you did, right?
I don't remember if you asked, but if you ask now, I would say, yeah, he's phenomenal.
But the question is,
I like what they did this summer. I mean, they were able to get much younger.
I did too.
And they were able to keep their core, you know, the new big three, I guess you call them. I mean, I like their team, but what's funny is it's kind of ironic. Where you worry about them now is their defense, which was always their strength. But even when Garnett is out there, you know, they're so small around him. Offensively, their spacing is great. They're fast. They're fun to watch. But defensively, I mean, there's a lot of holes there, and so that's going to be the question, whether they can kind of get back to being one of the better defensive teams in the league and still, you know, get out and run and play faster like they want to. So I think Doc's still searching for it, and he will be for a while.
You can tell by how the lineups are charting out. I think it's tough because you get older on the perimeter. Jason Terry, never a defensive stud by any stretch.
Right.
Pierce slips a little bit. Rondo has always been overrated defensively. He's great at certain things, not as good at other things. And then you have KG now, who can only play 27, 28 minutes a game because they're limited his minutes. And these are all these little tiny baby steps, but all of a sudden they're pushing you toward you're giving up 112 points in a game. You know,
well, it'll help when they get Bradley back. He's a phenomenal defender, and that'll be a big help. I think the big question mark will be Jeff Green, and he's been so disappointing the first couple of weeks after that great preseason. I've always been a big fan too. I loved his versatility and the things he can do, but he just has not looked comfortable yet. And you know, I was really hoping to see him at the 4 and Garnett at the 5, and you know, Green able to defend, you know, against pick and roll and switch pick and rolls and maybe anchor their defense. But he's not as good defensively as I think Boston had hoped, and so they're playing him more at the 3 right now, which which is interesting. But I think to me it says that they're worried about his defense at the 4.
Well, at least we didn't sign him to $36 million over 4 years. Oh wait.
Never mind.
Yeah, he was great in the preseason. Roped me in. I was singing his praises on Twitter, and the season started, and he just got that deer in the headlights look. Stopped going to the basket, and I'm not going to freak out about the Celtics team until Bradley comes back and until we're at the 50-game mark and everybody knows what their role is and what lineups work. And I still think that 2 seed is wide open in the East. It's just wide open.
Well, and you're a Celtics fan. You've been through this the last few years. They've gone through stretches where they've looked awful, and you just have to trust that Doc is going to have them in the right place by the end of the season, because he's done that year in and year out. And but you're right. He's playing a ton of rotations, searching for the right one. We did a preseason game. And he told us he may do what San Antonio did last year, which is have like 3 different starting lineups depending on who they were playing each night. And that's a tricky thing to do as a coach. And so it's going to take some time for him and his staff to kind of figure all this stuff out.
2 more questions. 1, LeBron, we're taping this on a Tuesday. Last night, LeBron, second game in 2 nights, turns it on in Houston. Reminded me of those Jordan games. And this is something you've said and Phil Jackson has said and a bunch of other people have said about Jordan. This is the thing that really made him the greatest out of anything. Those random crappy nights on the schedule. When the schedule's telling you you're going to lose tonight, and Jordan would just say, no.
Yeah. No, we're not losing.
Actually not going to lose. And it would be 10 times a year where that would happen. Did you feel like that was one of those? Do you feel like LeBron has kind of, is he edging toward that Jordan territory where those nights where he's just like, we're not going to lose, I'm not letting it happen?
Yeah, it sure looked like it. I mean, by the way, last night was an awesome League Pass night.
Incredible.
You had like great. 5 games go down the wire within a half-hour stretch, and I was just working the remote control, and it was really fun to watch. But LeBron was ridiculous down the stretch, and you know, I get the feeling not only from him but from their team now that they have such a deep level of confidence having won the title, both individually and, you know, as a group, that they're going to just win, that they're going to pull it out. And Houston should have won that game. They didn't execute down the stretch, but that's what happens when you played against the Bulls back then. That's what happens now when you play against Miami. I mean, they just keep coming at you and they wear you down, and then LeBron is able to take over. He's pretty amazing.
Do you have a favorite Jordan story from one of those nights when the whole team's dead, Rodman was out drinking till 6 a.m, Pippen's back hurts, you're like, we're going to lose by 20, and then Jordan just has a look on his face and you know it's not going to happen?
We had a game in Vancouver one year, and they were the worst team in the league, or one of them, and we were down 10 in the middle of the 4th quarter, and Derek Martin, of all people, started talking trash to Michael. I don't know why Derek would talk trash to Michael. That was a strange thing, but he started going at him, and Michael just was incensed. I mean, he couldn't believe that this guy, who was an NBA journeyman, you know, and a great guy. Like I don't know what got into him. I think he was maybe just having fun, and started chirping at him, and Michael just took over and scored like the last 15 points of the game. And it was, you know, 4th and 5 nights, and we were exhausted, and it was just one of those scheduled games where you think, this could be trouble. But thank you, Derek Martin. That's all it took.
Don't you feel like if you're, you know, people love comparing LeBron versus Jordan, Kobe, and it really seems like the one difference between Jordan and everybody else was that everybody in the league understood, like, just don't make him angry. He was almost like the Incredible Hulk. Don't look at him. Don't do anything to, like, I don't feel like, I think LeBron has a chance as a basketball player to be as dominant this season as maybe Jordan in any of his peak seasons. But the difference is teams don't go into a LeBron game saying, don't anger him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think
one little edge that made Jordan different.
Yeah, I think LeBron just is at his core is just much more laid back than Michael.
Yeah.
There was nothing laid back about Michael. And I just don't think anybody ever cared more about winning than Michael, you know, if that makes sense. I mean, it just meant everything to him. And obviously the league is filled with ultra competitive guys, but he took it to a different level, and somehow that just, gave him the fire to fight through a fourth game in 5 nights in Vancouver in February. That's just who he was.
Last thing, we're doing a big piece about Marv Albert on Grantland on Thursday.
Oh, nice.
And you've worked with him. How many years have you worked with him now?
This is our 7th year working together.
What's your favorite Marv Albert story from that 7 years?
Wow. Wow, you've put me on the spot here. I mean,
well, we can edit it.
Yeah,
I'll rephrase.
Okay.
What's it like to work with Marv Albert? Because this is a guy now he goes back to the 60s. I was watching him. He's doing a Jets-Seahawks game on Sunday.
Yeah.
That wasn't even the best game, but we ended up putting that game on the big TV because we got to hear Marv Albert call play-by-play. I mean, this is something that has been going on now for 50 years.
Right. Well, and of course, the whole time when I was playing, Marv would do, the big games, on NBC and then on TNT. And so I, basically listened to him the whole time growing up and playing. And so to sit next to him is amazing. I mean, he's the best at what he does. He's the voice of the NBA. I'll give you a great Marv story. He's got a wonderful sense of humor. I mean, he's just a really wry, witty guy. And one thing that Marv does every year is I come in with a request for some kind of a project, a personal project, and he jumps at it. So, for example, I've done 40th birthday party videos with Marv about my buddies. I've done, fantasy football draft openings, for my pals. I've done all this stuff with Marv, and the guy is nails. He's so good at it because he makes it sound like it's this huge event, and yet he's throwing in all these little, side jokes and inside jokes with my friends. Marv has no idea what they are, but he just plays the role perfectly. Right. And it's so good. I mean, it's just, you think about it at home, right? If you grow up and you're playing basketball, you think about Marv Albert calling, the shot when you made a play. You hear Marv's voice. Well, we actually do that now for my friends and my family and stuff. It's awesome. I'm going to have him do my daughter's volleyball season recap video this year for her high school.
Oh, wow. You should have him do your voicemail.
I know. I should do that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because definitely, especially in the media, people slip as they get older. You see it in basketball, obviously. We were just talking about Paul Pierce, but announcers, they start missing names, and they reach this point where they hang on for an extra 2-3 years, and you think, man, this is it. And I feel like Marv, it's almost like he's timeless. He might be a robot.
He hasn't missed a beat. He is right on top of everything.
He really hasn't.
Yeah. You know who else is like that? Is Dick Enberg. I had a chance to work with Dick on Sunday for the college game, Syracuse and San Diego State, on the aircraft carrier in San Diego. And I had never worked with Dick before, and it was an absolute joy. I mean, he's so good at what he does. He's like Marv, he's got that classic voice. He's dead on. He has not missed a single thing. He's still so sharp. And the coolest thing was at the end of the telecast, I thanked him and told him what a joy it was to work with him. And he said, "Well, just so you know, this was more than likely my last college basketball game I'll ever do." And I thought, wow. Oh my God, how cool is that? I got to do the last game in Dick Enberg's college basketball career. I mean, pretty awesome stuff.
That's amazing. Well, if it's any consolation, you'll be my last BS Report guest. You can add that to your list.
That's it? All right.
When's that going to be? The last, whenever my last BS Report is, you'll be the last guest. We'll work
all right. I'm going to hold you.
Steve Kerr, be nice to my Celtics tomorrow as they're giving up lots of easy baskets around the paint.
You got it.
We will see you on TNT. Thanks as always.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.